know it, then it looks as something supernatural. But it's not. If you know what is happening, you know what is happening, and then the magic disappears. So, magic is based on three things. First, ritual. Second, symbols. And third, and this is the core of it, trust, faith. So, in order to create a magical act, what you have to do is you have to enact a ritual, and you have to believe in the ritual, expecting something to happen out of that. And if you believe in the ritual, it doesn't matter what the ritual is. It could be anything. When you enact the ritual, you're expecting something to happen without doing any work, only the ritual. And that's the foundation of magic. Now, in order for magic to work, you have to believe in it. If you don't believe in it, you know that there is a hole at the bottom of the hat of the magician, then the magic disappears and everything collapses. So it's a game of imagination. And he is imagination. And imagination can be used in two different forms, for the good or for evil. Because I can steal by confusing you, or I can dream and create new worlds and new fantasies and new possibilities. So Hermes is a dichotomy, right? And it's this game between these two things. He's good and he's evil. He's black and he's white. Just as magic. So magic can be black or white. In white magic, what you try to do is you try to bring light to people, and to enlighten people and show them knowledge and teach them. And those are the masters of the world. That's Jesus Christ, that's Buddha, that's Carl Jung. These people that show light on the trees. And then you have dark magicians, and what they do is they try to keep things occult so they can enact magic on you. And that's it. Okay. So the way this works is that what you want to do is, and if you remember, the idea of a complex. So a complex in Jungian psychology is a bunch of ideas or feelings or emotions clustered together around a theme. And an emotion, by the word, it means movement. So what you want to do is you want to present a stimulus, and then out of that, what you want to do is you want to get a predictable outcome. So if I can produce an emotion on you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move you. Now, if you don't have television, and you're a smart person, and you live for 2,000 years or 3,000 years without soap operas and reality television, what do you do when light goes off? You think. And what you think about is you think about yourself and the relationships with people. So what these ancient people were masters at is they were masters at knowing themselves. And if you think about it, that's what the Oracle of Delphi had as an inscription on top. Know thyself. And that's the foundation of philosophy. And philosophy comes again here. So it's know thyself. And when you don't have television and you're not distracted, what you can do is you can think about your own nature. Now, for a long time, these people and monks, they were obsessed with the idea of sin and the idea of the sins and the virtues and all this. And what they did in a monastery for 400 years, you're praying all the time, what else do? You think about emotions. And what they did is they created these maps of emotions. They are incredible. You can see them here. So they represented them in trees. And they have here, you have two trees here, the tree of the virtues and the tree of the sins. And then what they did is they mapped every conceivable emotion and they represented them rhetorically in these beautiful images. Up to a point where, and this is incredible, this guy, you can see his name here is Ramon Llull. He was a Catalan and he was a Franciscan priest. he is the father of systems and computation. What he did is he mapped all the possible emotions that we saw before, and he created this a computer where he mapped all the possible emotions in the different circles, and then you can rotate them. And what you can do is you can create all the possible permutations of emotions and how they interact with each other. And what he did is he mapped them and he put them on trees, and he created volumes and volumes of these things, of interactions of emotions. So he created a systematical, speaking of systems, approach to catalog emotions. He put them one before the other. And now, I think this is the most compelling image that I have here, and here is where mythology comes from. And this is what we're trying to define here. This is a beautiful, I love this image. It's from Ingress, and what you can see is, you see the guy here is sleeping, and you see his subconscious. So, the nice thing, or what these people did, is that they created language to be able to describe the mind and the soul. Now, the problem that we have today in our world is that we have a myth of modernism. And what we have done is that we have created a world where if we cannot quantify things, they don't exist. So everything that is not quantifiable has no place in our society. Think about everything. You go to school and they try to measure if you're learning or not with systems of multiple selection and numbers. You go to work, you make a work of art, the first question that comes is, how much is it? It's about quantifying everything. Now, the problem is that our mind is not quantifiable. And here's where comes my personal experience. I've been obsessed with this idea of consciousness since I was 13 or 12. And I went through the side of the rationalists, and I ended up studying neuroscience and working in neuroscience and studying computation. And I ended up in NYU Medical Center dissecting brains, looking for the soul. And guess what? I couldn't find it because it's not quantifiable. You cannot quantify it. So the problem is that it's the problem of literalism. And literalism takes two different forms and shapes. One is superstition. So when people see myths and we talk about gods and all this, people believe in the gods literally. And then they go and they just believe in them literally. Now the other extreme of that, which are also literalists, is the scientists and the rationalists. Because what they do is they believe in the gods literally, and they dismiss them. Because they say, no, this is ignorance, right? It's not true, it's fantasy. So they're not real, I cannot quantify them, and then they remove them. So it's just like, do you remember those images in the 80s that were like this blurry, noisy thing, and you had to cross your eyes, and all of a sudden, boom, something three-dimensional appeared? Do you remember those? And you sit, the first time you got one of these, you stare at them for hours and hours and hours, and you couldn't see this. And one day, you look at it and whoosh, the 3D image appears, right? Mythology is like that. Because you see it, and then you see the superheroes, and Superman, and Batman, and Zeus, and all these guys, and you say, but how come it's not possible? How come someone walk on water? How can these things happen? It's like, it's not real, it's not rational. But one day you realize that we have the capability to think in a different way. And we have an intuitive and emotional side. And in our society, it's been suppressed, and we're in a complete imbalance. And that's what is missing in our society. We lost half of we lost our soul. We're just with a digital world that produces beautiful things like these machines and the ability that we can be together here, but we lost the soul. And the beauty of this is that when you talk about it and you bring people together and you forget about the machines or you use them for what they are, that is tools, what you get is the soul comes back. And remember, when there are two or more in my name, I'm going to be there. That's what it is. So, speaking of the language that they created, the beauty of mythology is that it's the language to describe the soul. And it's not rational, but it's open to imagination. So it's a language that is open-ended. And you can never end up trying to interpret or understand the myths. And so when you see all these gods and all these things, what they are images that talk to you. But they don't talk to you in a rational way. They talk to you on your subconscious. And that's what they do. So, one of the first concepts that they had was the idea that in the world there are four elements that are air, water, fire, and I always forget one. And air, water, fire, earth. The fourth, whatever. So, the nice thing, and this is one of the hermetical principles, is the principle of correspondence. And what the principle of correspondence is, what it says is, as above, so below. And as below, so above. What it means is that what is outside of you is reflected on your psyche inside of you. And what is inside of you is outside. Because at the end, it's just the same thing. You're a mirror looking at yourself and bouncing back. So, what they did is, they took the elements and they said, oh, the world, the outside world, the reality is made out of four elements, and they map them to different temperaments or psychical moods of people. And then once you create this mapping, right, and you have elements, what you just did is you created language where by start creating stories and legends and myths about these different things and the different permutations which are infinite, what you're doing is you're describing, by talking about elements, what you're talking is about emotions and feelings. They did the same thing with the gods. So what they did is they took the planets, and planets mean the wanderers, and it's the bodies that you see on the sky that are not fixed, but they move and they have their own behavior, and they assign to them a god and a metal in the case of alchemy. So alchemy speaks of metals, and then what you're trying to do is you're trying to transmute one metal into another. In astrology, what you're measuring is the movement of the planets and the relationship of the planets. And that's what you do when you are an astrologer. And so they assign to each of them one of the gods. So the first one that you have here is Saturn, then Jupiter, then Mars, then the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. And that's what you can see with your naked eye on the sky. Those are the planets. Interesting. Look at the symbology that they created to talk about them. They have three elements, which is the cross, the circle, and the semicircle, which are the symbols of the earth, the sun, and the moon, which is the body, the spirit, and the soul. And then all the others are permutations of those three things. Now, the next thing that they did is that they took each of them and they attached the influence that they have on people. So for each of them, what they created were these beautiful images that are called in German the Planetenkinder, the children of the gods. And you see here, these are alchemical images from a book called Splendor Solis. And so you see a flask in the middle where you have contained the essence of the metal. On top, on the chariots, you see the different gods. Each of the gods has a couple of the constellations. And then at the bottom, you have a human activity. So the way you read this is that this god is the one that controls this emotion or this activity on humans. That's the Venus is passion, right? And you can see here, Venus is passion. So you have Venus here, and then if you can control that emotion, what you end up doing is you regulate this behavior, emotions. What we're talking about magic, right? So another thing that they did is they assigned to each of these gods, right, good things or behaviors are positive and negative. That's another of the hermeneutical principles called the principle of polarity, where what you have is opposites. So one is the attributes that are in their eyes good. So you have prudence, temperance, charity, hope, justice, fortitude, and faith. And then to counterbalance that, what they did is they created the other side. That is greed, gluttony, sloth, envy, pride, anger, and lust. And what they did is they assigned to each of them one positive and one negative aspect. So you can see here all the planets, right? So Saturn is greed and prudence. That's Jupiter is gluttony and temperance. The Moon is sloth and charity. Venus is lust and justice. Mars is anger and fortitude. The Sun is pride and faith. And then the last, which is Mercury, is envy and hope. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you an example of how this works. And let's take one of them. So, one of the myths that we have is the myth of Saturn. His Greek name was Kronos. And the myth of Saturn says that Saturn started devouring its children because he thought that one of them would dethrone him at some point in his life. So he started eating his children. And you see all these images, right? Like this is from Peter Paul Rubens of literally Saturn devouring his children. Now, what Kronos, which is a Greek name, means is where chronometer means, is time. So has nothing to do with him, and it's a beautiful image that opens your imagination to create all these Superman stories and all these things where you can engage your imagination around the attributes of him. But what Saturn represents is the psychological awareness of time. And think about it, this literally time consumes its creatures. All of us here are aging and we're gonna die. Time devours everything. But we're the children of time because absent time, nothing happens. So time devours its children, but it's the psychological awareness of time. Now, what they did is, so here is again Saturn on top, and then what happens? So if you are aware of time, the first things that happens is that you realize that you're gonna die. So the psychological implication of knowing or being aware of time is fear, because you know that you're mortal. Now, that has two aspects as we saw before. A bad one and a good one. The bad one is greed, because if I know that tomorrow is uncertain and that I have fear of what's going to happen tomorrow, what I do is I try to accumulate today. But the positive side of Saturn is prudence, because I can take steps today to prevent bad outcomes tomorrow. So, you see, once you start understanding Saturn, not as a Superman on spandex, right? But as this, and you start creating myths about this, and you forget about the literal images that you have, but they're present and they're reminding you of, the symbols are reminding you of that, and you start thinking about what they're telling to you in your inner core. They're talking about yourself, they're talking about your soul, and that's what myths are. Myths are reflections of ourselves and our souls. Now, how many of you saw the video of the other presentation that I did? Okay, no name. But for this one, I had another presentation, and that's how I met George here. And I have a deep description of this image here and how they're balanced, but I decided to present something different because why would I repeat myself, right? And you can see the video. This image, what it shows is, one of the things of the gods, if you remember, is that gods are immortal. What that means is that you cannot kill them. So all these attributes that we have in our heads, we cannot kill them. They're always present. Now, the other thing that they learn is how these gods interact with each other, and all the myths are about the interaction of the gods. So the idea is you cannot kill them, but what you can do is you can balance them each other, what is called in alchemy the coincidencia oppositorum, which means the opposite, the coincidence of opposites. And you can take two things that are totally the opposite, and by arranging them in a certain way, what you do is you neutralize them. So remember the myth of Saturn. What happened to him? Zeus came and dethroned him. What happened? What is Zeus? Zeus means institutions. Zeus is regulations. Zeus means the law. So if I have uncertainty, what I can do is I can create laws to try to regulate and create certainty. And in that way, when you put those two planets together, they balance each other out. Same thing, so on this side you can see that, and on this side you have Venus and Mars. So you have rage, which is Mars, and war and all this, and then you have the passion and love, and then if you can put them together, you can manage that, and then you can balance that out. So this whole image is about balancing your different passions to create a neutral point where you can tame your animal side, and that's the dragon underneath. Now, if you see, this is the Rebis, which is the hermaphrodite. Hermes and Aphrodite, right? Together, they produce this. What it means is the equilibrium between both sides. Oh, you have the sun and the moon, the positive and the negative, the masculine and the feminine. And when you put them into balance, what you create is the hermaphrodite. And you see the bridge between them? Mercury. Because Mercury is imagination. So when I have the subconscious and I have rationality or the ego, when you put them together, when you connect them, what you're doing is you're creating the balance. So that's how you create the alchemical process. Now, the next thing is mandalas, and you wanted to know how mandalas are related to mythology and all this. This is a mandala. And the way mandalas are presented usually is you have a square, and inside the square you have a circle. This circle that is supposed to be presented here is called the alchemical egg, or the ethanol, which is the oven where you cook the different metals to produce the gold. Now look at it. You see literally what it is? It's a skull. So what you have is the square outside. The four elements on the corners represent the world outside. And the egg represents the skull. What happens inside your head, which is your mind, your soul. Now, all mandalas, or many mandalas, let's not generalize, but many mandalas have exactly the same structure, and they're structurally identical. And the whole thing is to learn the alphabet that they use to represent them, so you can read them. So what you have here is the same mandala, you see, the square, and the circle and the focal point inside. On the corners, what you have is, look, the earth, water, air, and fire. And the four animals that they represent, the lion, the salamander, the bird, and then you have here the dragon or the animal in the water, right? So it's the 4 elements, and then you see a triangle here, which is anima, spiritus, spirit, and corpus, which means body. And then in the center, what you have is the psyche, which is the head of the alchemist. In the center of this thing, imbalance, is imbalance. And if you remember, do you remember the image of Leonardo, where you have the guys? These guys were doing it, the Vitruvian man, right? It's exactly the same thing. It's the same thing. And yeah, let's leave it there, because we could go like for 2 hours here. Now, once you learn that format, you're gonna start seeing it everywhere. Like images, religious images, and images from the past, they represent the same thing. It's an alchemical image. You see? 4 corners, 4 elements, the circle. Look at this. This is called the blade, and this is the chalice. And then here, you have the union of the chalice and the blade, which is the hermaphrodite, remember? The union of the masculine and the feminine, what you create is the rebis, the hermaphrodite. And then underneath you see a cave. This is the skull, and these things are in darkness, right? This is the subconscious. And you see the 7, and it's all numerology as well. Numbers are very important. Every time I see any of these images, first thing I do is count. It's my engineer side, right? But they tell you things. Here, the 7 planets, the 7 passions in the subconscious. And then the sun and the moon, which is the alchemical wedding between the king and the queen, which ends up creating the hermaphrodite, or the balance between both sides of the brain. You can see it that way in modern terms. Same thing again. 4 elements. You see water and fire, the 2 triangles, creating the hermaphrodite in the middle, and the center, the air. And think about air. What is the color of air? It's black. And basically alchemy means the arts of the black earth. Chem was the name for Egypt in Greek. So it's a pun on words. What it means, close your eyes. What is the first thing that you see? Darkness. It's the interior of the cave. That's what it is. That's where you have to start looking to find the light. And now, what is interesting about this is that because we've been around for so long without television, around the world, everybody came to the same conclusion. And they created exactly the same structures around the world. So this is a Tibetan mandala. And now we're moving into the east. Look, it's the same thing. You have the sun and the moon there. Then you have the chalice and the blade in the middle. The 4 elements on the corners. It's the same thing. Now, it's very interesting. We're talking about ritual and the way you learn these things. So they have this ritual, and this one is called the Kalachakra Mandala, which means the wheel of time. And what Buddhist Tibetan monks do is that they sit down and they create the mandala every time, and then they destroy it in a ritual that lasts 1 or 2 or 3 days. And then, but think about this, what you're doing is you're enacting with your body the mandala. So you're not just learning by conceptually doing something, but you're learning with your body. It's just like learning to play tennis. When you learn to play tennis, you're not using your intellect. Now, you can use the same thing to awaken your imagination and your dormant side. And that's what they do here. They enact in a ritual the creation of the mandala, and because of we're creatures from 3D, we have this spatial notion. What they're doing is they're merging themselves in the space of the mandala. So as they're creating it and they're painting it in this ritual, what they're doing is they're moving their body around that, and then the concept of the mandala gets imprinted by repetition in their neurons. So they become the mandala. Here is another one. Very interesting, same thing. You see the elements. Now in the center you have 12 images, then 7 around. Remember 7 and 12? And in the center you have black and white, which is the rebus, the coincidencia oppositorum. Now we take that to the west. This is a 7th century mandala. You have exactly the same. So what you have is the zodiac around, then the activities of the influences, and in the center you have the child, which is the union, is the Christos. That's what you have. So now you start seeing what is happening. In this mandala, exactly the same structure. You have the 4 evangelists around. Each of them is represented by an animal, which represents one of the symbols of the constellations, the 4 elements, and in the center, consciousness. Christ is consciousness. That's what it means. Crucified in a cross of matter in the world. Is consciousness trapped in the world. Again, this is a mandorla from, this is Canterbury. Same thing, you see the crystals. So it doesn't get more Christian than this. And it's alchemical, it's completely alchemical and magical. That's what it is. And look at this. It's the same thing. The sun, the moon, the alchemical wedding, consciousness, the 4 elements. And what is interesting about this is that once you open your eyes, or your eye, you start seeing around, this is everywhere. And it's in our world today, it's everywhere. Look at the structure of things. They're mandalas, all of them. You see the yin and the yang? These are the 4 enagrams for the 4 elements. That's the flag of Korea. Look at the hermaphrodite in the middle of the flag of Israel. The Nazi flag, same thing. You see the 2 S's in a perpetual circle chasing each other. That's the yin and the yang. It's the same movement in the center of this game between the 2 sides of the brain. And lastly, the flag of the UN, where you see you have the caduceus in between, the air in the middle, remember air, black, center, consciousness, the wings, it's the same thing. And what I want to show you now is the mother of all of them, and it's money. And look at this. You see, this, look at this, right? How do you feel? Think about it. You see the spell? We're in trance. We are in a spell. You sense it? I broke one of the fundamental unspoken rules of the world. And we are in trance. We've been fooled. We've been taken into a ritual. And the foundation of our society is a spell. And it's an alchemical spell. And literally, there is nothing more alchemical than money. The creation of something out of nothing. You see? This is a piece of paper. That's what it is. Wake up. Paper. And we exchange our lives and our time for this that has no value. Is taking something that has no value and creating gold out of it. And in a way, when you control emotions of people, what you do is you control it. You created a magic spell. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the history of money. The dollar comes from here. This is called a pestalor. The word dollar comes from thaler, which was a Bohemian coin, a silver coin, a very fine quality of silver. And this is from 1528. And look at what the image was there. On one side you have the cross and the serpent. On the other side you have the crystals. And more than anything, what this was a talisman. They had a pest at the time And they thought that the way to protect people, or what they sold to people, is that the way to get healed and not get the best was to carry these things around. So you see, the source of money, this is magic. Now, the word money comes from moneta, Juno moneta, which was one of the names of the goddess Juno. And in her temple, what they did is they mint the talismans, which were called the monetas. From there comes monetary. It's the same word. And in the temples, what they used to do was they had the monopoly of minting coins in the temples. So you see here, this is the temple of Hera, which is the name of Juno, right? It's the same. And this is the temple, and that's where they used to mint the coins. But guess what? That's the headquarters of the Federal Reserve. You see, the people, the wizards that have the monopoly of creating talismans and money are still around. But the thing is that we're in a spell, and because it's hermetic, and we don't see them, we don't notice them, they can fool us. That's the Bank of England. Those are the doors in the Bank of England. From all possible things that you could choose to put on a door, look at what they decided to put. The carusius. Very interesting. The biggest alchemist in human history, and the most famous one, was Isaac Newton, the head of science, right? The reason. That's the way the myth has been presented to us. Well, he spent most of his time studying alchemy. Now, for the myth of scientism and modernism, that doesn't fit well, right? Because you want the guy that came with the laws of gravity and the father of modern physics, he cannot be a wizard. But the last 30 years of his life, he spent them at the Royal Mint in Britain, and he was the biggest alchemist, and what he was doing was minting money. That's what he was doing for the last 30 years of his life, and he became incredibly wealthy. Now, during his life, he wrote more about alchemy and esoterica than he wrote about physics. And his writings disappeared from time. And guess who got them on the 20th century? John Maynard Keynes. You heard about Keynesian economics. He's the father of modern economics. He got the books and the writings that nobody else had, the manuscripts of Isaac Newton. Well, he was an alchemist. And he created the system of money that we have today, which is the foundation of our society. And he's an alchemist. Now, look at this. This is a £1 bill. I'll copy here for everyone to see later on. On one side of the pound, what you have is Isaac Newton, and on the other side you have the Queen, the symbol of authority, and in the center, what you have is the carusius. It's crazy, right? If I was making this up, it wouldn't be as nice, because this is reality. Now, one thing I forgot about the dollar, remember what is the word that is on the center of, was on the center of the bill? It's one, and on top it says trust. So, you see, money is exactly the opposite of what it portrays. Money is a Saturnian talisman. It's based on fear. Because, think about your family. If you trust the people around you, you don't ask them for anything in exchange when you give them something. But when you mistrust anyone around you, then you try to use something, and the word is trust from here, trust. But it's exactly the opposite. What you're doing is, because you're fearful that people are going to screw you up, you're asking for a receipt. And the foundation of money is fear. Now, bankers have been obsessed with this for millennia. Because you see, bankers are the priests that live in the new temples, and they come from the past, the Magi. They're the philosophers, the alchemists. That's who they are. And they used to inhabit the temples and mint the money. So they've been obsessed with this for many thousands of years. And the latest incarnation of this happened in the Renaissance. And in the Renaissance, what you have is that the banking families of Italy started to bring on earth the texts from the past, the alchemical texts. And the Renaissance is because of the bankers. What they did is they brought all the knowledge from Greece and Rome and Egypt, and they changed the 1400 years of darkness that the church had brought into the world. And what they started to show were images from antiquity, and they started to present them and study alchemy. What they were doing is getting the techniques of alchemy. And remember what alchemy is about. Alchemy is about control of emotions. So it has two sides. If I know how to control my emotions, I can balance myself. But if I can't know how to control your emotions and you don't know how to, then I can control you. So you see this image, it's in the ceiling of Cosimo di Medici. It's a mandala where, and this is called, it's incredible, it's the apotheosis of Cosimo. It's when he became a god, right? And look at the, you see the mandala, the four corners, he's in the center. And Cosimo, what he did is he got someone called Marsilio Ficini, and he was basically a monk, a priest, and he was his astrologer. And what he did is he translated all the Platonic books, and he's the father of Neoplatonism. And all the ideas of Platonism got into all the Renaissance images. You see all these images, you go to the Vatican, right? Which, by the way, the Medicis put two popes in the Vatican. You see the images? They're all painted images from Greece. They're the gods of the Roman gods and the Greek gods, all over the place. Now, if we start coming forward in time, what you're going to see is that in the 19th century, there was another banking family, which is called the Warburg family. And the Warburg family, the eldest of them, of their siblings, whose name was Abi, he created the Warburg Institute. He was supposed to be the head of the banking family, but he decided that he didn't want to. And he left that to his next brother. And what he decided to do was to go into Renaissance studies. And he created the Warburg Institute, which is a very renowned institute of Renaissance alchemical studies. And if you know the name of this woman, Frances, but yeah. So what she did, right? She wrote about alchemy and about the ars memorial and all these things. And this institute is dedicated to the study of alchemy and the Renaissance ways. Now, what Cosimo de Medici was doing with these images, right, was he was using them to manipulate people. And his founding of this, his interest in this, was social control. And he became the wealthiest and the most powerful moment of his time. So, here is Abi. And you can see here, this is from an arts newspaper where they talk about how he decided to spend all his life studying alchemy and so on. Now, here are his brothers. And there are two interesting ones. This is Paul. Here is Abi, begging for money to Max, which is the one that got the head of the banking family. Now, let's see. Paul Warburg, the third brother, he came to the United States and he immigrated here in 1902. And he became a US citizen in 1911. And he the architect and the father of the Federal Reserve. He created the Federal Reserve System. The temple that we saw, the alchemical temple that we saw a couple of slides ago, he is the father of the Federal Reserve. Now, as he became the father of the Federal Reserve and actually the vice chairman of the Federal Reserve, and World War I started, he was in charge of creating all the loans and the structure of capital to finance the war. Very interesting. This is part of the campaign of what they did. This is 1918. What you have is, you see, alchemy, pure alchemy. They're playing with your emotions. You see the symbols, fight or buy bonds. Third Liberty Loan. And then they got a very famous actor at the time who was, he's the Zorro, the original Zorro, and they rally him around the United States asking for people to buy bonds. So you see how is the manipulation of emotions to get into money. Now, the story gets even better. So Paul, at the end of the war, 1919, you have the Paris Peace Conference. He was one of the advisors for Woodrow Wilson on the negotiation of the Versailles Treaty, where they were planning how to pay the reparations of war of the Germans. Now, his brother, Max Werber, right? He was the head of the delegation of Germany. And he's the guy that signed the Versailles Treaty. So here you have two brothers that just ended a war where 40 million people were killed, and they're sitting, negotiating the terms of how to pay the loans and the debts of the war. It's unbelievable. It's like... Now, here's another guy that was in there, and he was also one of the advisors for Woodrow Wilson, and he's Edward Bernays.
You know who he is?
He's the father of propaganda, and he's the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And this is what he had to say. He was there as an advisor for Wilson, right? We're governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Oh, one more, by the way. This is incredible. Guess who was the head of the delegation for Britain on the Paris Convention? John Maynard Keynes, the alchemist that got the books from Newton, Isaac Newton. It's beautiful. I stopped reading novels and fantasy anymore. Reality is better. It's incredible. So, let's start to wrap up. Let's go back to mythology. This is Pan. Pan is supposed to be the son of Mercury. Now, Pan is the god that domesticated the cattle. And he's basically the god of the shepherds and the flocks. He moved the flocks around. Look at the image. Look at what he has on his hand. Remember the Mandalas? What he has here is air and then the planets on his hand. And what he has is his flute. So literally what this is saying is Pan handles and controls the emotions of the flock. And the word panic, by the way, comes from him. It's an image from the Book of Alchemy of Carl Jung, where you see the Sea King, the prima materia, from whose heart the planet children receive their crowns. So you see all the emotions around, driving the heart of the king, consciousness. Here is another image from Albert Dürer, who was one of the best masters of printing in the 16th century. He was an alchemist. He drew a lot of alchemical images, like the Melancholia. I don't know if you've seen that image. It's like an angel, like here, like depressed, and that's an alchemical image. Now, here what you see is Hermes with his tongue controlling society. Because you see, language is magical. I can cause hallucinations of you when I talk. Close your eyes for a second, all of you, please. Giraffe. You see what I can do with language? At the beginning it was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. Because the act of creation is done through voice, through speaking. Because it creates images, imagination, which is Hermes, right? And I got so excited. Oh yeah. So through his, when you create the world with your words, you can use that for deception, right? Because I can create a reality that is not real and make you believe. Or it's a tool to enlighten people. So I'm going to show you the last one to show you that alchemy is everywhere and is about controlling emotions. Look at mandalas, modern mandalas. And they're everywhere. Look at them and think about them. What do they make you feel when you see them? What do they evoke? And you're going to see that we live in a world that is full of magic around us. And everything we do is controlled by a spell. We're in a deep spell. Thank you.
Questions, comments? I think everyone's speechless. Lori?
So, since we talked a lot about money banking system, and of course, currently now we're all fascinated by the Occupy Wall Street movement, and where do you think we're going? Are we creating new alchemical symbols with the Wall Street movement, or do you think?
Well, the other thing I like to do is collect failed spells. So here we have money from the past. This is the marks from the Weimar Republic. You have one of one mark, and here you have one of I don't know how many millions of marks 2 years away. So the problem with this is that, remember what I said about magic. When you start to catch up with the trick and you start to lose your trust on the spell disappears. So what I think that is happening is that we're living at that moment where, because of technology, right, we created this system to control, and what it's doing is bringing information to everyone, and we will have now access to information that before was hidden, just like when Gutenberg created the Bible and was able to print the Bible, Look at what happened to the hegemony of 1600 years. Came down because people were able to see. So they lost their trust, and then the system collapses, and it starts again and again and again, and those are the cycles, which is the order of the hermetical principles. So I think we're in a very interesting moment where the system, the spell is going away, and we're waking up. And then, what that means, right, is that because the social fabric of our society is this, right? When people start losing faith on this, what I think that happens is that you have social struggle, because the foundation, the organization of our society collapses.
Yeah, one of the things I'm involved in is a group that has a time banking system where it's hour for hour, but you bank time, it's not barter, but it's like you do something for somebody and you get an hour of credit that somebody else can use for something else. So it's like all this energy going out, relationships connecting. And as you were talking, I sort of got this feeling of like it's trying to undo, to use time and energy, but not alchemy. It's sort of trying to take away the whole thing about money, and I'm not quite sure, you know, I'm sort of scientific.
It's just like what I was saying about when you see a 3D image and you cannot see it, right? So people are still trapped in the same system of finding, oh, if this system of money collapses, what do we do? What other money do we get? What other spell do we get into, right? But what I think that has to happen is a change of consciousness. When you get a change of consciousness, one day you're going to realize that this is not necessary. We don't have to distrust of each other. And when there is a mass of people that believe that, and I truly believe that that's going to happen at some point, we're probably not going to see that. We're going to see struggle, but at the end of that, hopefully, what you're going to see is that people are going to realize that you don't have to fear. You don't have to be fearful of everybody else. And look around, our society is based on fear. Everything is fear. Fear.
But it's not only our society based on fear. That society, when it was appeared, it was already based on fear. It's fear not only that we lose means of our existence, but also you see in ancient society we have to fight animals or whatever. You see, it's still fear is not human development. Fear is much deeper. It's in life of the first bacteria, because if bacteria does not have a fear, it won't exist. So it's much deeper than just here.
Remember, the gods are immortal. You cannot kill them. Fear is part of what we are. We are fear. That's one of the things we are. What we have to learn to do is to create balance. So we can do what Zeus did with Kronos.
So we can become gods. You saying that we can become gods. If you won't feel fear, we became gods. This you're saying or not?
I would say it. I'd be willing to say that when our brains reach our mind, which regulates the flow of information, becomes supremely balanced through whatever medium. Some people call it opening of the third eye.
That's the Buddha.
Some people call it Buddha
Buddha.
consciousness, Christ consciousness. When that takes place, our mortality will no longer be a threat to us.
Now, there is one thing that, and I think this is the problem that we have, is that the fundamental principles of reality, we cannot break them. So, a real God can break the principles. What we have to learn is how to work in harmony with them. So, this illusion that we can create a fantastical society based on money, right, where we can create wealth out of nothing, and we can become gods, right, that we're masters of everything. I think a nice thing about the Greek gods and their myths is that Greeks knew that they had limitations. They always knew that. They never aspired to become gods, right? They were humans, and even the gods, if you remember, they were not all powerful. They had defects and things. They were human, right? So I think God is a loaded question, because it's one of these complexes that has a lot of projection and a lot of things. It's been polluted for too long.
So when you say money, you start to despise it the way you say it. But, so what is, if you want to use the word currency, which is what it is, what could replace currency? Because the world is too complex to say, well, I'll trade you the apple for the orange. It's very complex. You need a currency. So that doesn't make it evil, because you need currency. And I don't know that it's so fearful. I think it's a positive thing. I can give you this, and you can give me that. And currency is just the middleman between those in that transaction.
Think about your family, right? And the people the close people, right? Like people that are close to you. And you don't have a check and balance system like that at home. The first Hermetic principle is called the principle of mentalism. It means everything is consciousness. So the separation between you and I is an illusion. You and I, at the end of the day, are the same. So the idea that I can trust you but not someone else, right, is the creation, is caused by imbalance. When in a society, and everything comes from education at the end of the day, the way we grow and the way because we never developed the soul in our society, and we stopped developing a long time ago. So we have airplanes and we can send messages at the speed of light, but 50% of the people still get a divorce, and we have wars all over the place, we send bombs. You see, it's a process of balancing. Now, tools like computers, they can be used for good, right? That's the other interesting myth that we have, is that one side can overcome the other. So, and that's the Manichaeist myth, right? Is that, and look at the Disney movies, all of them there is pure evil and there is pure goodness. And they're always in a war, one trying to exterminate the other. Look at this.
Fear is not always evil. I mean, you can't tell a gazelle that he should not be fearful of lions.
Absolutely.
Looking at him. So I mean, and you can't say we should not have fear when we walk out on Park Avenue and look out and pay attention to the traffic light. I mean, fear is not necessarily negative.
I agree. That's the aspects of the gods. Remember, like Saturn represents one thing, but also the opposite. Like nothing is all the way one thing or the other. I totally agree. You can use things for what they are as tools. The problem is when they end up controlling you.
Yeah, but back to that currency thing. I didn't get an answer about currency. I think even among friends, we need currency, to neutralize, that everybody understands what it is.
Yeah.
So
I don't have an answer. Just a response. I think cultivating a certain attitude is important, and I think in Western society we have cultivated an attitude when it comes to currency, an attitude of exchange, and I think that diminishes trust. I think what needs to be, and not that we negate that, but we need to cultivate an attitude of reciprocity, which kind of there's different nuances there, and that I think forces trust. So it's just masticate on those ideas, and I think historically we have cultivated an attitude of exchange, which is quite practical. And I think reciprocity is still there. I mean, what's happening tonight? We're not going to pay Jose, but I'm sure someone here is going to have their presentation, and that is reciprocity. It's a give and take within the collective. Does that make sense?
yes.
So I think that's a response, not an answer. Just a
You might
response.
say that currency is just one form of reciprocity.
Yes.
Now, it's stored energy, saying, well, you don't have anything that I want right this moment, so give me something so that, George has something I want, I can give it to him.
You see,
And
money.
I also have something, it's like, kind of like, nothing is kind of like evil or good. It's kind of like in the middle. It's when money was created, it wasn't intended to be a controlling tool. It was kind of like through the system and everything. Now you have to admit that money is used to control certain things, and it depends also if for you it's important or not. But I don't think money per se is the source of evil or not. It's exactly it's how you use it or how you the use that you give it to.
You see, the disbalance, I think, is that money is a means of exchange. So it's a medium. In our society, it became an end. So you see, the role of money changed. Now, we work to accumulate money. We don't work money, and I think it's a thing of education. We live in a world where money becomes secondary because it's not our objective in life, right? But we want to enrich our soul and our lives and not accumulate objects and wealth. Then it takes its place, right? It's a problem of imbalance, I think, like everything, right?
But actually money was invented as a tool of control. It was invented by kings and governments, not by people.
Well, basically, money was originally kind of like metals. It was kind of
Yes,
like a token. But it was for protection.
Who owned this money?
I
It was
disagree with that.
who did it?
I think especially what you point out in the
Come on.
Temple of Europe was created as a token for priestesses. mainly
Prostitution.
to have sex here.
Yes, prostitution. Yeah. Yeah.
That's where money comes from.
Yeah.
The temple minted the coins or the tokens so they could be dropped in boxes as an offering to the priestesses. And part of the offering was the priestesses gave themselves to the merchants or whoever dropped off the money.
Yeah, but also like, there were some coins that were used as charms. In terms also were used, as protection. And like for example, I have my chain, and my chain has like a little medal. And it's, it's the symbolism that I put it into it. And, for me, that it's not that that medal is going to protect me, but that medal is going to make me feel more secure. Kind of like, it's also that part, like if you have from ancient times, this is not a modern thing, from ancient times, people used to kind of like print something and put it as a token of protection or as a token to the gods. So later kind of like it...
But when you're saying ancient times, where are you going to? Pre-Hellenic or post-Hellenic?
Pre. I'm talking about, for example, pre-Columbian times. I'm talking about, when you go to the museums and you see like what people used to collect and what they use the tokens for, or gold per se, that it was kind of a symbol of God.
It wasn't necessarily a symbol. If you are a believer, you're infusing your belief, and we aren't to that extent believers. Other people were. So who's to say that the metal was just metal? It didn't need to be symbolic. It could be the amulet of power. If you believed, then other people believed as well.
Can I ask you to go back to something at the very beginning of what you said?
Yeah.
What were the 3 elements necessary for ritual?
Symbols,
Symbols,
ritual,
ritual.
and faith.
So that's money, that's all religious institutions.
Well, no, rituals is anything, right? Like when I shake your hand, what we're creating is we're creating a symbol that represents something, right? So the end result of the ritual is that you're enacting, you're learning a conditioned response to a stimulus, right? That's what ritual does, and that's anything. Like, look at Italians, how they move their hands when they're talking, right? It's conditioned. Or
So
look at me, right?
Then are you saying everything we do is magic?
Is another word for that? Yeah, absolutely. We're magical because we live in the realm of the soul, and we live in the realm of emotions. And the thing is, you cannot take it literally, right? It's an allegory for.
But if we live in the realm of the soul and emotion, where's the ritual?
Well, no, the ritual is the enactment.
It has to be outside of the soul.
Everything you do is a ritual.
But it can't be, the ritual must be physical.
Right.
It's physical, it cannot be spiritual.
No,
That's the faith
that's the body. Do you remember that you have the triangle with body, mind, and spirit? So what you're doing is you're enacting something.
I'm not getting that.
Well, the Freemasons use that same faith, body and ritual, same thing.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I'm just not getting it through your example.
The last reason. Good thought, good word, good deed.
So the good deed becomes the ritual, the word becomes the corpus, the physical, and the thought is the mind.
And the mind is conditioned by the society you're in, plus your peers, plus whatever makes you nurture on in society.
That basically creates the illusion. Those 3 things together, which is the alchemy. So when you tear the dollar bill, it creates an emotional response because of the illusion that's been created as in terms of ritual faith. And
you remember the dollar bill, all money. You apples to have different color seals. Red.
Well, you came late, we went through all that. So we went through all of that whole concept. But it's all on video, so, you'll be able to see it again.
I can't help it. I was at a faith for an art show.
So if there are no questions further, I'd like to thank Jose for coming. Give him a round of applause.